Okay, one of my favorite contributions by the behaviorists is the special case of binging. And I say that because I love to eat. And I eat for every reason that there is. So you might have heard of people who eat because they're stressed. Well, I eat regardless. I eat if I'm stressed, but I also eat if I'm bored, right? You might have heard about people who eat when they're sad. Well, I eat when I'm happy to celebrate, and I can eat when I'm sad to mourn. In other words, I just love to eat and I really have to watch that. And I do have learned that I just can't have some things around the house because I can go off on a binge. And so I can't have a bag of chips. A lot of people can have just a few chips, but I would eat the whole bag. And I've learned that when my friends, bake me a birthday cake, if there's half of it left over, do not let them send it home with me because your mind can work in some really irrational ways. Okay? And it's hilarious, but it'll go something like this. I'll go home and I'll think, oh, I'm just going to have one more piece, and so I'll have another piece, and then I'll think, oh man, that was so good. Eating makes me hungry, right? And that's all I can think about is that cake. And so I go cut another piece. And then by the time I'm having my third piece, I'm horrified, right? Because there's still most of this cake left. It's huge. And I don't know what to do. And that's where the irrationality comes in, and your mind starts telling you something really stupid like, man, you got to get this out of the house. You better eat it really quickly so it's not in your house and tempting you anymore. But anyway, a lot of people do have difficulty with binging, and it may not be with food. It may be with something else where, moderation, it's not bad for you, but where you can go overboard and binge on it. And this is, really a great example here. So if you look at this slide, you'll see Jay's Foods consumption record, right? And if you look at what the behaviorists are telling us, they're giving us 3 steps here. Keep a record, make it public. So he's keeping a record. And if it's posted on his, let's say, Facebook page every day, whoa, how about that for making it public, right? Then he's making it public. But let's take a closer look at him and how he's eating, okay? Tuesday, kudos to Jay. It looks like he did pretty well. And he's starting out pretty well on Wednesday, but oh no, what's happening here? So where does this go awry? It really is probably starting here with this extra Diet Coke, right? Maybe, but something happened here because look at this, 12 slices of pizza, 2 pints of ice cream. And by the way, this is a 1-pound bag of M&Ms on Wednesday. And this poor guy had to post this on Facebook. All right. So, what do you think was going on in his mind? What kind of irrational thoughts were occurring around here that led to all the rest of this after he started to goof up? Okay. So whether it was after that second Diet Coke, or whether it was 3 slices into the pizza, or 5, or whenever he really, really knew he was in trouble, right? What do you think was going on in his head? And this is not uncommon for somebody who binges to think, oh no, I blew it. I blew it for today, so I might as well go ahead and enjoy the rest of the day and then get back on the horse tomorrow. Get back on the horse's back tomorrow, right? I blew it. So, this reminds me when I had a cousin who, when she was a teenager, she had a curfew of midnight when she was dating. And she was dating her fiance at the time, and who ended up being her husband. And so they had long-term engagement until she was old enough to get married. But they had always followed the curfew, and one night, and her parents were very, very strict on it. Others of her siblings had broken it before, and they were very strict on it. And so They just happened to forget one night. They totally forgot. And when they realized it, it was 45 minutes after midnight, and they knew they were in deep, deep trouble. And so they decided that they might as well make the best of it. And they stayed out for another couple hours. They knew that either way, her dad would be waiting for them in the front yard, right? Um, but what do you think the rationale was? Well, we knew we were going to be punished anyway, so we thought we might as well make it worth it. Okay. This is exactly that kind of thinking that's going on here. And that's why this third step here is so very important with binging. And that self-imposed incremental punishment. Incremental punishment. Okay. Now think about that with Jay. Let's say that he had worked out either a deal with his therapist or with a couple other individuals who were also trying to lose weight, right? And they worked out a deal together where, they decided that maybe he decided with his therapist that for every so many calories that he goes over, if that is in fact what he's counting, it might be carbohydrates or something else instead. But we use calories as an example. And he might, come agree to the idea of for every so many calories over, he's going to pay $5 towards a charity that he really admires. Or, if he has an agreement with a couple other people that are trying to lose weight and they all agree that for every so many calories over, they're going to put $5 in the bucket. Okay, and when there's enough, all three of them will go out to eat at a restaurant that offers light meals, healthy light meals. Something they all can enjoy. But think about that. If that had been if that had been in place, hey, it could have prevented all of this. It likely would have. And it's very important now that that dollar figure, what is being paid here as a punishment, is something you will feel. So if you're working with three people who are all trying to lose weight, it might be a different number for different people because you might have somebody who is jobless and they would feel $1 really badly. And yet for another person, it might be $10 because they're from a more affluent family, right? But anyway, the special case of binging, and I'll tell you, I did this to myself when I was moved into the building I'm now in campus. So I am in a building that is called Schwada. And so our people in psychology are spread over 3 buildings. And when I moved into this building, the first thing I saw when I came over to see my office, I walked in the doors and I saw vending machines. I thought, oh no, in my building, right down the hall from my office, in the door where I'm going to pass them every day coming in and every day going out and every single trip to the restaurant. Okay. And so I went to my office, and after checking it out, I sat down in this chair, and I thought, I've got to do something about this. Okay. And I remembered that the behaviorist had the best plan for this special case of binging. And I made a pact with myself then. Hey, and I do not make a pact with myself unless I am really, really serious about it. Okay, but I made a pact that if I bought anything from the vending machine, other than water, but if I bought a snack or a Coke or anything other than water, okay, from these vending machines in this building, for each item I bought, I would donate $5 to one of my favorite charities, which is Psychi, the Psychology Honors Club here at the university, the Student Psychology Honors Club. And so I figured, if I do mess up, at least I'll know that the money's going for something positive, something good, something that I believe in. But you know what? I knew it would work, and it did, and I knew it would. Because I am one cheap SOB. Hey, so I've never purchased anything out of these machines that are here in my building. And that brings us to self-regulation. Okay, so go ahead and take out your self-assessment sheet, and for questionnaire number 9, you can now fill in the name, the title, and you tested yourself on self-regulation. Okay, and let me give you some information now so that you can interpret your score. The possible range of scores, lowest possible was 20, highest possible was 140. So 20 to 140. The range of scores we've gotten from our ASU students has been from 27 all the way to 140. Okay, so no matter how high you came on this, you're not going to top out our best students so far, but you might match them. Okay, and what is the mean? What is the mean we got from our ASU students? 95.4. 95.4. So many of you learned about infant attachment styles. Okay, if you've taken a developmental class or a child psych class, then you've learned about infant attachment styles, and oftentimes it's called bonding styles, right? But we're going to take it further, and we are not going to assume that you all, because I'm sure some of you did not learn about this. So let's quickly review it. Mary Ainsworth was the person who did this research with infants. Okay? Very cool research, because what she did was she identified how these infants had learned now to attach to their or bond with their major caretaker. Okay? You say, how in the world do you study that with infants? Well, she created what Mary Ainsworth calls a strange situation. And you're not going to think it's strange at all, because basically it was your typical waiting room. So there's chairs all the way around it, and there's some toys in the middle because it's one for babies, right? So in their first year of life. And but she calls it a strange situation because guess who it's a strange situation for? It's a super strange situation to the babies. So any new situation which they're not used to, they haven't been in before, or even if they have, but they're not used to it yet, right, is a very strange situation for a baby. And that might be fine as long as a major caretaker is there. But then what? Okay, so here's what she would have the major caretaker do. And, in her study, it was mothers. That's certainly not always the case. But, the infant does tend to have a certain bonding style with the major caretaker, no matter who that might be. So sometimes it might be the father, sometimes it might be a grandparent, right? Sometimes it could even be a much older sibling. But anyway, she would have the major caretaker bring the child in to this waiting room. Nobody else would be there, not even the therapist would be in sight. Okay? And the caretaker would have instructions to let themselves in, to bring the baby in, to close the door, to sit down, the baby's on their lap. Okay? But there's some very colorful, very attractive toys in the middle of the floor. And as the caretaker looks around the room, they see a one-way mirror. Okay, so you and I and the caretaker know that the therapist is watching, but the baby doesn't know that, right? Because all you see from that side is your reflection. And what's really drawing the baby's attention, as you might imagine, are those very colorful toys on the floor. Okay, and so these babies had all started crawling, and here's the deal. Are they going to crawl down towards those toys? And so here's, all three of these different bonding styles, they do go down there and they do start to play with the toys. Okay. With the secure children, or with the anxious and ambivalent babies, it can take them a little longer. Not always, but sometimes it can take them longer to go and play with the toys. And with the avoidant children, sometimes they're the very first to go play with them. And again, not always, but sometimes. But basically all three go and play with the toys. And we don't see much difference until later, but if you look really closely, you can see some little things. Like if you're using any eye traction, or if you watch really closely and you've got a good view through that mirror, one thing that you'll notice is that oftentimes the anxious ambivalent children will show the most checking behavior when they're playing with the toys. And by checking behavior, what we're saying is they're looking at toys, they're playing with it, but they keep glancing back up at what? Yeah, the major caretaker. And so they just are double checking, make sure they're there, make sure they're there, right? That's their safe base, and they want to make sure it's there. So the anxious ambivalent oftentimes, not always, do the most checking behavior. And then the avoidant oftentimes will do the least. But we see it, certainly we see checking behavior. Okay, that's not unusual, not even for secure children, just maybe in the amount of it. Then the caretaker has instructions that after a little while, after a certain number of minutes, they are instructed to leave the room and shut the door behind them and go away for a minute. Okay, and I'll tell you something, no such thing as a happy camper here. So it doesn't matter, even if the child is securely bonded, hey, they are visibly distressed, usually crying, okay? And so the caretaker waits their 1 minute and then they go back in. So just long enough for the therapist to see what is happening, how the child is responding. Then they go back in. So just a minute or two, and they go back in, they sit back down, they close the door behind them and sit back down in the chair. Okay? This is where we see a really big difference between these different groups of babies. So babies who have a secure bond, okay, will, run and greet their caretaker, and they're all happy to see them. They're very easily comforted. Those tears are dried right up, right? And it doesn't take them long to go back to playing with the toys. What kind of message does that give us when they go back to playing with the toys? And if you think about it, they're saying, I trust. I know that you might leave again, but even if you do, I trust that you're going to come back, right? So that's these secure children, securely bonded, okay? And the anxious ambivalent children, hey, this is a very different story when the major caretaker comes back into the room. They have a tendency to cling to them and oftentimes will not ever go back and play with the toys. And the message there being, I'm afraid you're going to leave again, and then this time it might be for good, right? Okay. So there's kind of a distrust default there. And then with the avoidant children, and this one's really interesting, okay? When the caretaker returns, it's not unusual for the avoidant child to ignore them. In fact, sometimes they'll pretend like they don't even know that the caretaker is back in the room. But if you use eye tracking, you'll know that they saw them in their peripheral vision. But they're kind of pretending they didn't. They just keep on playing with those toys. Okay? I want you to think what might be going through that little mind, right? Something like this that they're feeling. Okay? I don't trust you to take care of me, so I'm going to what? I'm going to take care of myself. Okay? Now, remember at the beginning I said, this is the style these infants have learned to bond with their caretaker. Okay? So before you start thinking, oh, there's something wrong with anxious avoidant babies, or there's something wrong with or anxious ambivalent, or something wrong with avoidant ones, remember this. Sometimes they have really learned that the caretaker is not reliable. Okay, and so what's happened is we know that there's dispositional differences, and that probably guides them down one of these two roads if that's the case, either anxious ambivalent or avoidant. Okay, so they either become too dependent or too independent, right? Okay, and also, so we can't go out there and blame the babies without a lot more information. And the same thing, we can't go out there and blame the parents with a lot more information, because we also learned already during the biological approach that even newborn infants have different dispositions, and sometimes that can create an insecure bonding style, one of these two insecure bonding styles. Okay, but the important thing here is basically this is the bonding style of the infant, and there's no right or wrong. Okay, so you might be, you're likely to be one of these three. Now, technically speaking, there's actually a fourth bonding style, but it's a fraction of a percentage of babies, and it's beyond the scope of this class. But if you take abnormal psych, and from myself or someone else, you will learn more about that. That bonding style, but it's basically for babies who are abused or really severely neglected, and that's why it's just a tiny percentage and we don't cover it in here. All right. We are going to start our next segment with something super interesting, how this plays out in our adult dating and marriage type of relationships, romantic relationships.